Sarah, welcome back to my channel, or for those of you who are watching for the first time, welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to be filming the first video of my college application series. Now, I filmed an entire medical school application series of videos, and so if you're applying to med school or you know someone who's applying to med school, be sure to check that series out. It's linked in the description box below. But I'm now starting the college application series in which I'm going to make a number of different videos highlighting the different parts of the college application process so that when you guys get ready to apply to college, you'll know what to do. So this first video is going to be about the college application timeline. I'm going to talk month by month about the different things you should make sure you're doing if you plan to apply to college. So the first chunk of time in our timeline are the months of June and July of your application year. And there are a few things you should make sure you're doing in that June to July timeframe. The first is making sure you've taken your ACT or SAT. Sometimes students take the ACT and or SAT several times, and I encourage you to try to make the final time you take it between June and July of your application year. I think it's important to make sure you take it by June or July so that when you're coming up with the college list, you're looking at where you're actually planning to apply to, you know what your SAT and or ACT score are, so you can kind of gauge what schools you're competitive at. Another thing to make sure you're doing in the June to July timeframe is asking for teacher letter of recommendations. I'll make a whole video on how to ask for teacher recommendations, which teachers to ask, but I really encourage you guys to ask your teachers before the end of your junior year. And so if you're in most high schools in the US, school will probably end for you sometime in June. And so make it a point to ask your teachers for letter of recommendations before the school year ends. Another thing to do in the June to July timeframe is to visit colleges and come up with a tentative college list. I've had students who apply to, let's say, between 8 to 12 schools and never visit any of those schools in person prior to applying. Then they get into some schools, they go to the admitted students weekends, and then they realize they don't really like that school at all, and it's not a great fit for what they're looking for. And so I strongly encourage that by the end of that June to July timeframe, you've visited at least a fair number of the schools that you plan to apply to. I think these visits are really, really great, and I'll make another video that gives more details on what schools to visit and what to be paying attention to during your visits. The final thing to be working on in this June to July timeframe is starting your Common App essay. Your Common App essay is probably one of the most time-intensive parts of the college application process, and I think it's a great idea to get a head start on that as early as possible. A lot of students choose to wait until the fall of their senior year to start writing it. But if you're like a lot of students, you'll be juggling sports and AP classes and just there's a lot going on senior year. And so I think the summer is a great time to get started on writing the Common App essay so you have plenty of time to write multiple drafts, to come up with lots of ideas, and to ensure that you're going to end up with a really good polished version of that essay. And then when August rolls around, keep on working on that Common App essay. Keep drafting it, keep revising it, keep editing it, because ideally by the end of the summer, you're gonna have a really strong draft of it. And then in addition to working on your Common App essay, you can also take the month of August to actually fill out your Common App. Now, some of you may also be filling out your coalition application. You can do that during this time as well. The Common App opens on August 1st, typically, and so the entire month of August can be spent filling out different parts of your Common App, things like the demographic section and the activity section. And so by the end of August, ideally, you'll have a pretty good draft of your Common App essay, and you should have a lot of your actual application filled out as well. And this doesn't mean you can't make changes to it as the months go on, but I think getting a head start on filling out your application and working on your Common App essay during the summer is really, really smart and will take a lot of the pressure off of you as you go into the fall of your senior year. And now September will roll around, and there are a few things to make sure you get done during the month of September. The first is finalizing that Common App essay. Hopefully during the summer you've created a pretty good draft of it, but by the end of September it should no longer be a draft and should instead be the final copy. You also should be finalizing your college application list by this point. Hopefully, if you've taken the ACT or SAT during the summer, you've received your scores back, and you have a pretty good sense of what schools you're competitive at and which schools you actually want to apply to. I'll make another video talking about what schools to apply to, how many you should be applying to, but for now, just know that September is the month when you should really be finalizing that college list. And then once you have that college list finalized, I encourage you to make a spreadsheet of different deadlines for the application process. Different colleges are going to have different application deadlines depending on if you're applying early, if you're applying regular decision, if you want to apply in time for scholarship consideration. And if you're applying to a fair number of schools, all those dates can get really confusing and you might end up missing out on really important dates. And so my suggestion is once students have a full list of the schools they plan to apply to, make sure you're writing down any dates you need to know for application deadlines, financial aid deadlines, etc. This will make things a lot clearer as you move through the rest of the application process. Another thing to do during the month of September is think about sending in SAT and ACT scores and talking to your guidance counselor about submitting transcripts. If you're applying to schools early decision or early action, you're going to need to be sending those things in pretty soon. I recommend allowing about a month for transcripts and test scores to actually get to the schools that you're applying to. And so September is a good time to start thinking about what schools you need to send those to. Some students will send them all to their early decision or early action schools, wait a little while, and then send them to all their regular decision schools. But if you've already come up with your comprehensive list of where you're applying, you can send them all out to all of your schools at once, and it will make your life a little bit easier as the application season goes on. Another thing you should be doing during the month of September is determining if there are any schools you're applying to early, whether that's early action, restricted early action, or early decision, because those applications are going to be due earlier than obviously those that you're applying to regular decision. And so you should really be thinking about that during the month of September, identifying which schools, if any, you plan to apply to early, and then getting a head start on applications for those schools. Which brings us into the next thing you should be doing during the month of September, which is starting supplements for your early action or early decision schools. All colleges, or at least most colleges, will send you supplement essays. These are additional essay questions that are sometimes more specific to that university or college. And so if you're applying to a school early action or early decision, the application deadline for those schools are going to be anywhere between mid-October and early November. And so September is a great time to get started on some of those essays so you're not too overwhelmed by the time October rolls around. And then the last thing I recommend you do in the month of September is check in with your letter of recommendation writers. Hopefully you asked them at the end of their junior year, and hopefully they worked on those letters over the summer. However, if you haven't heard back yet that they've completed the letters, September is a great time to touch base with them and just, say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, just wanted to see how the letter was coming along. As a reminder, the deadline is yada yada. And I think just having that quick check-in and giving them a quick reminder that the deadline is approaching is helpful so that everyone's on the same page and things will be ready when they need to be. And then we have the month of October. If you're choosing to apply to early decision and early action colleges, October is the time where you need to be finalizing those applications and then submitting them. Application deadlines for early schools are sometimes October 15th, they're sometimes November 1st, but I think a good rule of thumb is to at least send your application in 1 to 2 days before the deadline. For especially big schools, a lot of students are going to be sending their applications in a pretty small time frame. And there can be computer issues, there can be issues sending it, and you don't want to risk not sending your application in on time. And so if your school's application deadline is October 15th, send it in October 12th or October 13th, just to ensure there are no issues when you try to upload and send in your application. Another thing to get done in the month of October is filling out your financial aid applications. So the FAFSA and the CSS profile are 2 financial aid applications that a lot of colleges and universities across the US use to determine merit scholarship eligibility as well as need-based scholarship eligibility. These applications open October 1st, and so a lot of students like to get those out of the way so that as the application season goes on, they have some fewer things to actually be thinking about. And so if you finished your early action or early decision school applications, I suggest working on your financial aid applications in this month as well. And then the last thing to work on in the month of October are UC school applications if you're applying to them. So UC schools, or University of California schools, have an application deadline of November 30th, which is much earlier than many other schools' regular decision deadlines. And so I encourage you to first prioritize your early decision, early action school applications, and then to prioritize UC school applications, just because they are due before most of the other schools that you will be applying to regular decision. And then in the month of November, you'll keep working on your UC application. You'll submit that whenever you're ready. And again, it's due November 30th, but try to submit it at least 1 to 2 days ahead of time. And then start working on the supplement essays for your regular decision schools. You might have between 5 to 20 supplement essays, and you don't want to save those all till the end of December when the applications are actually due. So I encourage you to try to get as much of those completed as possible during the month of November so that when December rolls around, you're not completely overwhelmed. And then when December does roll around, just keep chipping away at those supplement essays for your regular decision schools. Most regular decision school deadlines are either January 1st or January 15th, but you'll want to check with the colleges you're applying to know exactly when their application deadline is. But either way, you should be spending most of December working on these supplement essays and really polishing your regular decision applications. And then once you've completed these regular decision applications, submit them as soon as you can. So if it's a January 1st deadline, try to get that in by the end of December so that you don't have any issues actually submitting it. And then January is pretty much the same. You're just going to be finishing up your applications for regular decision schools. You're going to be submitting those applications. And depending on what schools you apply to, you may also be doing some interview prep during the month of January. Now, not all schools interview applicants, and it tends to be that more top-tier schools spend the time interviewing applicants. And so if you are applying to any top-tier schools, you may end up getting an interview invite. And so I recommend that in the month of January, you dedicate some time to preparing for those interviews. I'll make a whole video talking about interview prep for college applications, but just know for now that that is the time frame where you should be dedicating some time toward preparing. And then in the months of February and March, you'll be going to some interviews if you applied to top tier schools, and you'll be waiting to hear back from the colleges that you applied to. Colleges really vary when they notify you about an admissions decision. Some schools will tell you on a rolling basis, so you may hear in early January, early February, or March, where other schools have a very specific time when they'll tell you. If you apply to Ivy League colleges, for example, they decide on what's called Ivy Day, where there's one day at the end of March where all Ivy schools release their admissions decisions at roughly the same time. But assuming you're applying to a diverse mix of schools, you're probably going to be hearing admissions decisions at all different times. And so it'll be during February and March when you can expect those decisions to start coming in. And then April is the fun part. Hopefully by April, you've gotten admission to at least some of the colleges you were hoping to go to, and then you have the option of attending admitted student days during some time in the month of April. This will be an opportunity for you to visit the college or university you were accepted to, meet some of your potential classmates, and learn more about what it would actually be like to be a student at that college or university. And then last but not least, May 1st will roll around, and this is the deadline by which you must tell your colleges and universities where you have chosen to attend. If you were waitlisted at different schools, you're allowed to stay on multiple waitlists. However, you must only accept one offer of admission at a college or university. And so then after you've made that decision, after you've chosen the school you plan to go to, you have a few months of break before college actually begins, and your whole world will be different. And so I hope that timeline was helpful. I tried to cover the main things that you'll be doing in the months between June and May of your application year. If you guys have any questions about when you should be doing things during the college application process, send me an email, which is linked in the description box below, or comment on this video and I'll get back to you guys as quickly as possible. If you learned anything at all from this video, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more tips and tricks for the college application process. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.